Initiating sound check. Preparing and initiating pan test. Pan test left. Pan test right. Left. Right. Pan test complete. Sound check now complete. All systems are ready.
I gotta close the window before I record, cause New York don't know how to be quiet.
What up, my fellow Knicks fans? This is your guy Marcellus Ease, and don't panic quite yet. Now, I just want to say this real quick. Round of applause for yourselves, man. The Knicks right now, we just in a beautiful spot. I mean, things are looking up. We got all our draft assets. And at the end of the day, you got to recognize the rebrand, because the Knicks are definitely going through it. And I even think other teams throughout the league even recognize the rebrand. I mean, you could just look at the offseason. I mean, it's rumored that we're getting, PG-13, or even the season before Donovan Mitchell. And how the hell other teams come across to us? Hey, give us all your assets. They think they could run game on us. That's pretty much over right now, as Leon Rose is kind of instituting a whole new aura around the Knicks. Because other teams, best believe, when they come at us, they better come correct. Because we're not just going to be doing these stupid trades like Steve Mills did in the past when he was the Knicks president. Things like that is not working no more. So you got to recognize the rebrand. And there's even more opportunity for the Knicks to capitalize off of other things that will contribute to the rebrand, such as the play-in. The play-in is a perfect opportunity in the beginning of this season for the Knicks to kind of stamp themselves as a team to be taken serious. There's plenty of opportunity with that, as the whole league will be watching in Vegas in December for those finals. So that'll be a good look if we can get there. But fellas, the rebrand is real, man. The Knicks are just not going for the okie dokie anymore. And with all the player movement this offseason, especially after the Damian Lillard trade, the Jrue Holiday rumors, and at the end of the day, those Jrue Holiday rumors, they were just way too small-minded. I mean, we're in a good spot. We're trying to land a big fish. But shout out to Leon Rose once again, man. He's done a hell of a job. But, you know, this whole situation with Leon Rose and the Knicks, it kind of reminds me of one of these old school, action-packed, kind of movies that Leon Rose is in right now. You know, like one of those films where the hijacker gets into the plane, he kind of takes over, catches everybody by surprise. Then, all of a sudden, they're fighting back. And then all of a sudden at the end of the movie, somebody's in the cockpit trying to land the plane with no engine. Maybe one engine is working. The plane is shot up, there's fuel leaking, but he's still trying to land that plane, and it's a 50-50 chance. And this sort of situation is like what Leon Rose is in with the Knicks. He's the one in the pilot seat trying to land that plane with fuel leaking, one engine running, and it's like the league at the same time. I don't know, the NBA keeps switching up the rules this whole time that Leon Rose has been in the Knicks front office. You look back in 2019, the Knicks were eligible for at least the top 2 picks. And they changed the rules. They kind of gave all 3 teams at the top different odds of getting that lottery ball. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of weird, some of the things that have been going on, but it is what it is. Everything is evolving. If it's not evolving, it's dying. But Leon Rose does have to maneuver through all these situations. The Knicks not getting the first overall pick, and now he's pivoted in a situation where the Knicks have a good team to compete, and at the same time we have a bunch of assets, players that we developed like Quickley, Grimes, Mitchell Robinson, and we have a plethora of draft picks. So under any other normal circumstance, the Knicks will be in prime position to at least trade up and at least get some sort of star in case somebody becomes disgruntled and they want to leave. But the league, of course, is pivoting. And I'm talking about the brand new CBA that's already kind of kicked off this season, but it's primarily really going to kick off, as far as luxury tax penalties, it's going to kick off next season. But this is going to have major implications for Leon Rose and, some of the moves and some of the ways the Knicks have to pivot in order to keep, ourselves alive and try to get us up to that next level. We're trying to get over the hump and at least get a star or make some sort of roster change. But it can't be the old way in which we just trade a bunch of guys, get a bunch of high salary players on the team. With the new CBA now, they basically throw on a bunch of penalties on you when you build an expensive roster, and it limits your chances of acquiring other players and maneuvering. It really limits those chances. Those Clipper teams, those Golden State Warrior teams, the teams that try to overload with salary and then they still find a way to get Russell Westbrook off a buyout, those things end this season. That is no longer going to work anymore. So Leon Rose, he's going to have to pivot. And this will be very interesting how he lands this plane. Now, just staying on top of some of these rule changes and how it's going to affect the Knicks right here. I mean, the salary cap is going to go to 136 million. The luxury tax is going to be at 165. And if you're about $7 million over that, that's the first threshold. And then when you're $17 million over, which is at 182 million, once you hit that threshold, you become limited on how you can maneuver from matching salaries. That old wage is taking two guys for one star, match up their salary, and the salaries are almost about even. Can't do that no more. Once you're $17 million over the cap, they sort of limit you. You can only trade like a max contract for an exact contract. Like, it comes that close. So basically, the more expensive your team is, the less team acquisition tools you have to maneuver and get other players. Even mid-level exception contracts, you can't even do those anymore. Also, on top of that, you add the fact that the Knicks have a lot of draft capital, or just a good amount. With this new CBA, once you're $17 million over the luxury tax, my God, they basically start freezing your picks 7 years ahead. So if you stay over that $17 million mark 2 out of 4 seasons, then they're going to instantly make that first round pick that they're froze at the end of the first round. It's instantly a late first round pick off rip. And then also with these new salary cap rules, things get kind of interesting because you look at teams like the 76ers. If they happen to, maneuver off of James Harden, get another high contract guy, re-sign Tyrese Maxey, and let's say Embiid won it out. And the Sixers right now, they're hovering around, $172 million in cap. So let's say Embiid wanted to come to the Knicks. That leaves us in a tricky situation because now the Sixers, they can't really maneuver as much as far as matching salaries. Like, the Knicks would be able to grab 2 players and try to match it with them, but they wouldn't be able to do it on their side because they're over a certain threshold in the luxury tax. That's where things get tricky with this new CBA. So even if superstars want to leave certain teams and go to different, so even if superstars want to leave their teams and go to other markets, depending on how much over the luxury tax their team is, they might not be able to even do that. They can only get star for star. This new CBA does have its negatives. It definitely has its negative and drawbacks, but it definitely has some positives too. Because the Knicks, where we at now, we're like in that sweet spot in between 135 to 165 million. But it does leave us room to maneuver and have the chance to offer teams at least 4 first-round picks for guys this season. Because when you look at other teams going forward, if they're about $7 million over the cap, they can only offer 3 first-round picks. Teams that are under the cap, under that 165, or just at that 165, they can offer 4 first-round picks. So certain teams can just off rip, just have the upper hand in obtaining players. And that's another reason why you still haven't seen the Knicks re-sign Quickley yet. They're trying to figure out if they can make a move for this season, because if they re-sign Quickley now, where he has a rookie scale contract, like $5 million for this year, if they re-sign him, let's say they give him 18 mil going forward for the next 5 years, his contract get real tricky because we're trading away $5 million this year, but it hits as 18 next year. And depending on the team that he is going to, some teams are not going to want to hit over that second apron. They do not want to be $17 million over the cap. because that's where they're going to start becoming restricted on the moves that they can make. So contracts like Quickley, Tyrese Maxey, and Philly, that's the reason why you haven't seen them sign their extensions yet. Things get real tricky. Even though both the Knicks and Philly have more than enough room to give both of these guys $20 million for 5 years. And that's another thing with Quickley, he automatically qualifies now for a 5-year extension. I think all year is guaranteed, which is very interesting. They switched that up too. But definitely for sure, the Knicks already started kind of structuring guys' deals a certain way, is because I think they were looking ahead of all these rule changes. I mean, you can even see Josh Hart. Everyone is wondering why he opted into his deal, but the Knicks pretty much can guarantee him 5 years. And Josh Hart, low-key, he qualifies for more money over the cap with this new CBA. So he used to qualify for what, 120% over the, of the cap. Now he qualifies for 140. So he is benefiting by opting in, and he's giving the Knicks flexibility for the current year to possibly make a move and get someone else in case they got to make a trade and match 2 guys' salary, aka Evan Fournier, somebody else. They can match a couple salaries to trade for a star. But this is like the last season you could really do that. Next year, once again, teams that are over the cap, they're going to become limited. Let's just say for this example, the Knicks were trying to make a trade with the Golden State Warriors, which we all know are over the cap. This season, they can actually grab a couple guys, match it up, and get one of the stars that the Warriors have, right? They could do that this season. Next year, if they try to make that same move, the Warriors cannot do it. They cannot match. They're $17 million over the cap, so it limits them. They can only match an exact salary for an exact salary. So they would have to trade, let's say, Klay Thompson's salary for another guy who makes like $40 million, or even Stephen Curry. Let's just say somehow this is just an example. Let's just say somehow they wanted to trade Curry. They can only trade Curry for someone that matches his salary almost to a T. It could be a couple percentage points off, but it's almost to a T. And that's only because they're $17 million over the cap. I know this shit gets kind of confusing, but at the end of the day, starting next season, if a star wants out and his team is $17 million over the cap already, it's going to be a major issue even making a trade for that team. That team is pretty much going to be stuck with that star. That's just the way the new CBA is set up. And just for the Knicks also, expiring contracts like Evan Fournier's becomes really valuable this season, as there's going to be quite a few teams. They're going to begin to start pivoting and trying to get below that threshold of, being over the cap by 17 million. Some of these teams are almost about at 180. They're going to try to get under that cap because they're not trying to lose draft picks. They're not trying to be limited on what moves they can make. So contracts like Evan Fournier's is going to be super, super valuable this season. Now, another interesting thing with the Knicks is that Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, man, are 2 kind of star players right now. Man, these guys, if they keep going in, they're going to be eligible for Supermax, because they made it I don't want to say they made it easy to make all NBA, but definitely with these new rule changes, guys now have to play 65 games, and all NBA teams are now have no position. I know there's a ton of guards in the East, ton of guards in the West that always don't make all NBA because there's way too many guys. Now it's easier for them to make it because there's no positions in the all NBA teams. So you had the fact that guys might get hurt or guys might not play 65 games, and also there's no positions. So that could trigger all NBA selections for Brunson and Randle. Thus, they qualify for at least 35% of the cap. So their salaries go up. In case that does happen, that'll kind of nudge us faster of going over certain thresholds. So, because once again, even if you go over the cap in the first apron, which is over $7 million, once you go over the cap 7 mil, you start to become slightly limited. But it's not until you hit over $17 million over the cap is where they really put a stranglehold on your ass. But interesting enough, the Knicks got Randle on a nice little discount. Brunson, the way he structured his deal, I believe it's on a descending. I mean, it's interesting the way they structure a lot of these things. But with the new CBA, they could actually change the way they structure some of these deals. Now I see Randall and Brunson on the last year of their contracts. They have a player option. They could actually negotiate with the Knicks, kind of opt out of that last year. If they have to take a salary, lower for that season, they could do that now. And then the following years of that extension, the salary could climb up. That's just in case they need to stay under that $17 million of luxury tax. So you never know, because sometimes when their contracts come up, other guys need to be extended. So now the NBA overall, they allow teams to either, negotiate deals with their players before that last year, so they can negotiate that salary lower if they have to, and then the rest of the years it will increase. Yeah, that's something interesting they threw in there. They're kind of making it more flexible for players and teams to negotiate with each other during that final year where all those years are optional. So in the final year of that contract, whether it's a team option or player option, they made it very flexible for them to negotiate, even if the salary is lower for that 1 year. But starting the rest of the way, the salary can go back to normal. So that's definitely something worth paying attention to. But definitely in this Leon Rose era, I tell you what, there's been a lot of pivoting. And this new CBA, I'm telling you, he has the right team around him too. That Brock Allard, that guy he hired off of Cleveland to kind of be his salary cap guru. Man, that Brock Allard boy, that dude is nasty. Remember that season when LeBron kind of kicked everyone out of Cleveland before the playoffs started, before that trade deadline, and all of a sudden they got a whole new roster, a bunch of whole new guys, and they kind of made all the numbers work. Yeah, it was him. It was Brock Allard that made that work. So the Knicks right now, they have him in the front office working with Leon Rose. So I believe we got the right team around us. Leon Rose not really answering questions. They're keeping everything in-house. I like the way he's maneuvered so far. But like I said, he's going to have to land that plane, and it's going to be one hell of a ride. So continuing on with the Knicks rebrand, as I told you before, this summer, a lot of teams started realizing, this is not the same old Knicks squad from before. And what caught a lot of teams off guard last year was the Knicks finishing second in offense. Now, the Knicks, of course, we don't really have shooters like that, but they found a very interesting way to use analytics to sort of calculate where to take shots to get offensive rebounds. Now, just listen to Fred Katz speak about this, but this definitely caught a lot of teams off guard.
They had a unconventional offense, and even though they were not enjoyable to watch in the conventional sort of way last year, and that they didn't have a ton of athleticism, they didn't have a ton of high flyers, they had a slow kind of prodding offense. What I found enjoyable about watching them offensively during the regular season was the fact that they were just doing it very differently from pretty much every other team in the league. They valued shots the right way. They had a pretty good shot profile. Even though they didn't shoot threes well, Tom Thibodeau always says his goal for the team is he wants them shooting high volume on threes on at least league average percentage. Second half of the season, they basically did that. They were good at getting to the rim. They were good at getting to the line, and they didn't rely too much on the mid-range shot. And the mid-range shots that they took weren't really long mid-range shots. They were short mid-range shots. And they really value those short mid-range shots, in part because someone like Jalen Brunson is really good at it. They have a ton of guys who are good at floaters. And they also really value those mid-range shots because the short mid-range shots, the floater, you have a really high offensive rebound rate on those. And Mitchell Robinson in particular is incredible at offensive rebounding floaters. He actually had an individual, I'll have to double check to see what the numbers were last year, but 2 years ago, I know he individually rebounded 28% of the Knicks missed floaters. That was a higher offensive rebound rate just by himself than 7 other NBA teams had on floaters.
Damn. You wonder why Toronto Raptors are stealing information. God damn, Mitch is out. Mitch put it in work, boy. No wonder they're asking for all those first round picks.
One guy out rebounded 5-man units, 7 times down. He is an unbelievable offensive rebounder and is consistently in prime position, specifically to get floaters. He's phenomenal at it. And I thought they were clever in the way that they put the offense together. Jalen Brunson had an extraordinary season. I mean, he was just great all year on the offensive end. Julius Randle.
Especially after January 1st. Woo, that boy was killing. He was averaging about 28 points a game, shooting 51% and 45% from three. That January was crazy, man. Beautiful basketball by the Knicks. I remember those back-to-back games against the Bulls. Yo, Brunson was cooking. He left Caruso on his ass.
Had a really great bounce back year. Immanuel Quickley was especially the last like 60 games of the year, hit another level, played the best basketball of his life. And then they got to the playoffs and the offense bogged down against Cleveland, but defensively they were really good, pretty good at getting out on the run, really good at forcing turnovers. They were really good at knowing which guys to guard, which ones not to guard. Then it bogged down a little bit against Cleveland though. And then against Miami, the spacing just went away because the reality is they have basically four guys in their starting lineup who are at their best when they're inside the 3-point arc. And that can be difficult to maneuver against a really good defense. I think this is a story that's kind of a good microcosm of the Knicks' attention to detail offensively, where the Knicks knew, okay, we don't have a ton of 3-point shooters. Like, we don't have that. So we need to find every other little advantage to exploit to maximize this offense. So, okay, need to be awesome offensively. Okay, on the offensive boards. Okay, need to take the right kinds of shots to maximize your chances at offensive boards. Okay, need to make sure your shot profile is good. Need to make sure the right guys are taking all the right shots, all that kind of stuff. And one thing that I think is really interesting is the Knicks last year averaged more 3-point attempts per second chance than any other team in the NBA. And that is not a coincidence. They talked to Mitchell Robinson. When you get an offensive rebound, he knows what his reads are. Like, if you key in on Mitchell Robinson, I would not consider him a great passer. I would not consider him a great dribble handoff guy. He obviously doesn't really have like a playmaking set. Like, you're not giving the ball to him on like a short roll or something like that. He's not passing out of the post. However, he is quite good at passing back out to the perimeter after getting an offensive board. And they've kind of streamlined the process for him and their other players, where the rule of thumb is if Mitch catches it in the restricted area, it's not just Mitch, these are the bigs. And Hartenstein is a very good passer, so he's also very good at this as well, and a very good offensive rebounder, where if you catch the ball inside the restricted area, go back up. If you're
all of them do. I seen Josh Hart do it too. That's a very interesting observation by Fred Katz, but he's going in for sure.
Outside the restricted area, look to the corner. Whoever is in the wing is supposed to be streaking to the corner. And the defense is all jumbled up. They were trying to get the rebound, and they failed to do it. It's a great time to be able to get threes. And if you catch the ball outside of the restricted area, watch what Mitchell Robinson does. If he catches it out there, he's going to look right to the corner, and he's going to see somebody streaking to the corner. And they get a lot of corner threes out of that. They get more 3-point attempts per second chance point, which makes them not just have a ton of second chances because they get so many offensive rebounds. I mean, they were the best offensive rebounding team in the Eastern Conference last year, but it also...
It makes sense why we signed Dante DiVincenzo. He's going to add into all this. He's good at passing, especially creating off the dribble, like not to score, but creating off the dribble to find a guy open. And these guys don't make a lot of mistakes, man. But, man, whew, the Knicks are going in. I'm telling you, man, this rebranding is real.
It's their second chance offense really good because of the type of shot selection. They're not just like going back up or throwing it out and trying to run something. It's very rare you'll see Mitchell Robinson get an offensive rebound and then you just like toss it back up for Brunson to run a pick and roll with 10 on the shot clock. They try to operate real quick there.
But I guess when you have someone as obsessive about the game like Tibbs, and you combine them with all these analytical guys in the Knicks back rooms, I guess, you got to find your edge somewhere. And I'm not surprised that the Knicks are kind of one of the front runners to finding a little crevice of offense somewhere. Like, hey, this is a weak point. We could attack it here. It's a different way of looking at the analytics and utilizing it. But Fred Katz also spoke about Obi Toppin and some of his characteristics, even though he's a power forward, how he sort of kind of shed the same skin as a guard when it comes to his characteristics. You guys check it out.
So Obi Toppin is a power forward. And if we think about positions, then we think, okay, the Knicks are losing a power forward and they're bringing in a shooting guard. However, let's think about the way the Knicks used Obi Toppin. He hung out in the corner, and I'm not going to moralize on what was the right decision, wrong decision, whether he was handled right, wrong, whatever. That's up to everybody listening. But he hung out in the corner. Half his shots were threes. He was a catch and shoot option. They rarely used him in pick and rolls. They rarely used him as a roll man who would cut if a defender fell asleep on the backside every once in a while. And he'd get out in transition and be really good in transition. If we talk about positions, they are losing a power forward and gaining a shooting guard. But if you talk about basketball traits, like Obi Toppin had a ridiculously low offensive rebounding rate for a guard. The things that he did on the court, stand still, shoot threes, sometimes cut, get out in transition, didn't guard the paint defensively.
And he definitely did not guard the paint defensively. Oh man, I love my boy Obi, repping the city, man, out of Bushwick, Brooklyn. But yeah, if you look at the Miami Heat series, Bam got way too many inside the paint baskets, man, uncontested. He just laid the ball up. He just got in the lane too many times without even being touched. I mean, if you go back to my game breakdown of the Heat series, you'll see that a lot, particularly when Tibbs made his substitutions. Yeah, but there was no reason why Bam had like 20 points or like 17 points by the first half. And majority of those buckets was him getting in the lane just untouched.
He'd get lost when he was down low on the block a lot, having to be like, a help side defender. He'd be late and whatever. So like size in basketball is not actually important. It's not about size. It's about how you use it. And you can be 6'9", but Toppin, and he may play more like a 6'9" guy with the Pacers. But with the way that the Knicks used him and with the way that he played, and I think he's got a ton of potential, and I think he could be in for a really good season in Indiana. But he didn't play like a 6'9" power forward. That was not the production of a 6'9" power forward. It was the production of somebody else, which means they might be somebody else with a different skill set might be better fitted for the role that he was in. Like, you can walk into a 3% offensive rebound rate. You can walk into that.
So it is what it is. I mean, I'm going to shoot Obi some build. He did evolve because Tibbs needed him to shoot. He did improve his three-point shot a lot. But I'm telling you, the Knicks are doubling down on Tibbs because they're getting guys that kind of fit his characteristics. And Tibbs needed someone to protect the paint, get offensive boards. And it seems like Obi was definitely not that guy. And it kind of makes sense of why the Knicks need that, because obviously we don't have shooters like that. And that's how we can kind of counteract just us not having that sort of availability to make shots. It's just having guys crash the boards and on defensive end to protect the paint. Like I said, you guys can go back to my game breakdown of last year's playoffs. I mean, all 6 games, you'll see when Obi was in, along with that second unit, Bam had a bunch of uncontested layups. So it is what it is. I wish Obi the best. Hopefully, he plays well, gets his money in Indiana, and we'll see the verdict if he's still not defending in the paint and if he's still not grabbing boards on the offensive end. So former Bad Boy Pistons legend Isaiah Thomas had did a sit down where he spoke about his time as being the Knicks president of basketball operations. And he told a quick story of how he kind of struck a meeting with Kobe Bryant during that offseason when Kobe Bryant was basically looking for a new home. He pretty much had it enough of Shaq, and he was ready to either go to Chicago or somewhere else. But surprisingly, Isaiah Thomas said he struck a meeting and got Kobe to fly out to New York. Even though the Knicks could only offer a mid-level exception, Kobe was still interested enough to fly down and have a conversation. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
So I'm in New York, and Pelinka, who I've known since he was in college, and our Detroit team used to go up and play against, the Fab Five, Chris and all them, and Pelinka was there. So now Pelinka's representing Kobe, and Rob called me and he said, like, Kobe really wants to talk to you. He wants to, understand how you think. I told him a lot about, Detroit, the bad boys, everything else, and he wants to have a conversation with you. Now, at that time, Kobe is thinking about leaving LA too. And he keeps saying it's not about the money. And in New York, all we had was a mid-level to offer him.
And also the Knicks were kind of going through a lot of changes. Isaiah Thomas just got hired mid-season as president of basketball operations. And Allen Houston just went down with his injury. Also, the Knicks just traded for Stephon Marbury, so they was kind of going through their own restructuring process. But once again, the Knicks had no money to offer. I'm surprised Kobe Bryant still flew out.
Now, he didn't visit, I don't know if he visited any other teams, but he flew to New York to meet us to talk about signing with the Knicks. And all we had to offer was the mid-level. But he was really like, I got to get out of L.A.
Laker fans ain't gonna want to hear that, boy.
And I'm like, but Shaq there, right? And he was like, I want to win it on my own without Shaq. That don't make no sense. Because if I win it with Shaq, then I don't think I'm going to be able to rise the way I want to rise. And he say, so if Shaq is gone, or if I win it someplace else, then I can get to that next level, or whatever level he was trying to get to. I was like, okay. I've never heard anybody like think like that. You know, it's kind of different. And Rob was sitting there, and he goes, I told you this. He's a little different. You know, I say, so you want to shoulder that burden all by yourself.
And at the same time, Kobe was trying to build leverage to force the Lakers owner, Jim Buss, to trade Shaq. So the day after he actually traded Shaq, that's when Kobe actually re-signed with the Lakers. But it's funny enough because Kobe was trying to allude to the fans that he had nothing to do with Shaq being traded. I'm going to go to the chat, GBT, for this one.
Bryant insisted he had nothing to do with the departures of O'Neal and former head coach Phil Jackson. That upsets me. That angers me. That hurts me, Bryant said. Of speculation that he was involved in the team's decision-making. They did what they had to do. That had nothing to do with me. In a perfect world, we would have all come back and won another.
It shows you inside the cerebral mind of Kobe Bryant, because what he's doing behind the scenes is way different than what he's telling the fans. So it is what it is. It's crazy how Kobe Bryant couldn't stand Shaq so much that he was actually considering signing a mid-level exception with the Knicks. Just the possibility of that. You fellas definitely check out the mailbag description below. Hit the link. You guys can leave a voice memo, any questions, statements. I'm going to definitely have a segment on the show with the mailbag questions. But until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.